So earlier today, I came across this article as I was looking up stuff about the Packers, as I typically do every day preparing for these videos. And I came across an article on dairylandexpress.com written by Brian Sampson. It says here, 5 free agents the Packers should sign following offseason workouts. So I want to give my thoughts on these ideas, and feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section down below. So let's go to the first player we have here after we scroll past all these ads. Mike Purcell, defensive line. With the Packers shifting to a 4-3 defensive scheme this season, things are about to get interesting. They already boast a solid rotation with Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, TJ Sladen, Carl Brooks, and Colby Wooden. However, they could use some more beef up front. Enter the massive Mike Purcell. So, Mike Purcell, 33 years old. Last year, he had a 49.8 PFF grade, which is not very good. And I just think the Packers have enough depth on the defensive line currently with the players he mentioned, and I just don't see the Packers needing to add an aging player at 33 years old who had a below-average season last year. I just don't think that move would be necessary. So those are my thoughts on the first guy. Next one, Greg Van Roten, guard. The Packers are still piecing together this offensive line puzzle after losing Bakhtiari, John Runyon, and Yosh Nijman last season. Adding first-rounder Jordan Morgan, fifth-rounder Jacob Monk, sixth-rounder Travis Glover, and signing tackle Andre Dillard has certainly helped. But imagine the boost from signing veteran Greg Van Roten. So here we have another aging player, which I think that a common theme among lots of free agents at this time, near the end of June, is that there are lots of older guys who have still not been signed. And I think there's reasons for that. Lots of these guys will probably sign, if they do sign, super cheap deals, with whichever team decides to bring them in. But Greg Van Roten, 34 years old, he did play 1,000 snaps for the Las Vegas Raiders last season, had a pretty solid year, 75 PFF grade. He does have experience at left guard, right guard, and center. And so he's not a bad player, but I just think the Packers are, when you look at their offensive line, their decision to come in the draft 3 offensive linemen, I think that they don't need to add any more depth here. Also adding Andre Dillard, I think that at guard, there's a lot of potential options there. Already having Elton Jenkins and Sean Ryan at guard. And then depending on who starts at tackle, whether it's Rasheed Walker, Jordan Morgan, Zach Tom. Jordan Morgan, first rounder, could potentially play guard in his first year. Zach Tom could even move to guard if needed. And you still have Royce Newman and then Jacob Monk, Packers' 5th round pick on the offensive line. So I just, once again, don't think adding a veteran at this time, 34 years old, makes sense. Now, if you get into the middle of the season, he's still a free agent, the Packers have injuries, then at that kind of time, maybe you sign someone like this if you feel like you need to bolster your unit if there's injuries. But right now, I don't think the Packers really need to add an offensive line. And on that note, we have another offensive lineman here, Conor Williams, center. Another way the Packers can improve their offensive line depth is by targeting center Conor Williams. Despite tearing his ACL in Week 13, he should be ready to go by the start of the season, giving the Packers plenty of time to check out his medicals during the break and bring him on before training camp if everything looks clean. So if it weren't for Conor Williams tearing his ACL last season in Week 11, I would say this would be a solid idea because I was looking at some of his stats on PFF. He had an 86 PFF grade last season at center on 497 snaps with the Dolphins, which is an elite grade. The problem, which I don't think the Packers want to take a risk here, with their experiences with Bakhtiari and his ACL recovery over the past couple seasons, I just think taking a guy who is coming off an ACL injury Week 11, I just think it's unnecessary for the Packers, and it's a big risk to bring a guy like that in here. And we've heard a lot out of Green Bay from differing reports and reporters over the past few months that the Packers seem very sold on Josh Myers, and it sounds like he's probably going to be the starting center. And if not, Zach Tom can play center, Elton Jenkins can also play center, and Jacob Monk, 5th rounder, has a chance to be the backup center as well. So even though Conor Williams is really good last season, would be a good add-on, I just like to stay away from players who have torn their ACL, just because you never know what could happen there. So now to the final 2. Zack Cunningham, linebacker, he says here, thanks to their switch to the 4-3, the Packers need to target another area of depth at linebacker. To begin the offseason, they were open about being thin at the position. Since then, they've cut Devondre Campbell but added Tyron Hopper and Edgerrin Cooper via the draft. So Zack Cunningham, he's 29 and a half years old, played 700 snaps for the Eagles last year, had 66 tackles, 7 pressures. And once again, I just think that Brian Gutekunst is not really looking to add a lot of older type players right now at this time. Now, when it comes to June and July, that's probably, if you do add a player, they're probably going to be a little bit older with some question marks just because, at this point, there's a reason other teams haven't decided to bring them in. At the same time, you can get some values there, just like the Packers got on Devondre Campbell when they signed him for $2 million a few years back, and then they got a lot more value out of him than it costed to pay him in that first year with him being an all-pro. So it's like you never say never. You could sometimes bring in a guy that you don't expect to come through and play at a top-tier level, but it has happened for the Packers. We saw it with Devondre Campbell. We saw it with Rasul Douglas a few years back. And so it could always happen like that, but I think with the Packers, what they did in the draft with drafting Edgerrin Cooper, Tyron Hopper, I don't see them needing to add another linebacker here. And they also have Isaiah McDuffie, Eric Wilson. So I feel like there's enough depth at this point. Now the final one, which we've talked about a lot already in the past, or at least recently, Stefon Gilmore. So I'll read here. The Packers are obviously confident in their cornerback room as they didn't select a corner in the 2024 NFL Draft until the 7th round. Consider me a skeptic. He says, Jair Alexander's play was up and down last season, but I'm confident he can have a bounce-back year. I'm worried about the other guys. Eric Stokes has battled injuries and inconsistent play since his rookie year. Carrington Valentine had some nice moments as a rookie, but he has a lot to prove if he wants to be an every-down player. The other guys don't impress me much either. Adding Stefon Gilmore would definitely take away snaps from some of the youngsters, but it's worth the risk. So I've already given my thoughts on this, but just to quickly break it down, I think that right now with where the Packers sit at cornerback, I don't see them doing anything like this at this time, just because, even though there are some question marks with the other outside corner, not named Jair Alexander, I think that Gutekunst is, Packers GM is satisfied with, having multiple guys there in camp, battling it out, competing. And then I bet you one of those guys rises to the top, and the Packers are satisfied with, the output that comes from there, whether it's Eric Stokes, who's looked really good this offseason. The Packers seem pretty confident about him right now, and hopefully he can, keep this up and stay healthy, because in his rookie season, we saw just how good he really can be. And, Carrington Valentine even had some nice moments. So I just think there's enough depth there that one of those guys in training camp will push through. And I said in my recent video in the past couple of weeks talking about this, that if there were some injuries and Stefon Gilmore was still out there, I think that it could make sense because he's still a somewhat solid guy, a solid corner. And, he could add a boost if there was some kind of injury. But basically, my thoughts on the Packers roster, as you can tell right now, is I feel like the Packers roster is pretty solid. I don't think there's a big need to really add any kind of free agents at this time. If Gutekunst decides to sign some random player, then he'll probably means he sees some kind of potential in them, and maybe they compete for a depth spot or something like that. But right now, I just think the Packers are pretty locked and loaded, as are most teams right now in the end of June, just because of the draft already coming down, free agency. Most teams have the guys they want, and there will be some guys here and there who get signed, but overall, it's a pretty quiet time in the NFL. But you can get some values at this time because these guys are sitting out there, and they'll probably take somewhat cheaper deals. But if you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.